You know, it's exciting to get in the Bible. I don't know about y'all, but it's exciting to me. And to see things that you hadn't saw, and the Lord begins to reveal stuff to you, and you begin to look up scriptures that you thought you knew. I don't know whether anybody else does this or not, but sometimes, you know, the Lord begins to show me stuff, and I see scriptures that I could quote, and all of a sudden they're saying stuff that I hadn't noticed that they said. Anybody ever got done that? Just be reading and say, wow, I didn't see that. And it's exciting to do that. But sometimes, if we're not real careful, we'll get excited with the deep stuff and we'll overlook the basic foundation of the whole thing. Yes. And we hear stuff, and when we hear it over and over, if we're not careful, we will accept stuff that we hear as truth and never go look and see if it is truth. Hey, it's just in our mind. It's truth. And I remember when I was a child, and of course there's a lot of scriptures that goes on now. People will quote you Bible. It's not Bible at all. And you get folks that's, they'll agree with it because they've heard it too. But I remember my mom and dad when I was a kid, they had all kind of scriptures that wasn't scripture. It's because that's what they'd heard in church. And they wouldn't have a television for a long time because they said the Bible said that in the end time, people wouldn't go to church, but they'd stay home and listen to the devil talking in the corner. That was the television. That ain't in there. See? But they had heard that, and they believed it was. And they didn't have all this. They didn't have the modern ways to look up stuff in the Bible that we've got. They didn't have all the commentaries and the helps where you could find it. But I won't never forget them. For a long time, I wouldn't have a television because hey, that was the devil in the corner that the Bible talked about. And so you hear these things and until you begin to believe them. And some things sounds just like it ought to be in the Bible, but it's just not. And I heard a guy this week, and he said this. He said, we were not called. We've never been called to be perfect. Does that sound right? Never been called to be perfect. And he was a minister that said it. But let's look over in Matthew 5:48. If you got a red letter edition, it's in red. It means Jesus said this. Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. And while you got that thought, turn over to 1 Peter. And let's read that. Chapter 1, verse 15. But as he which has called you is holy, so be ye holy in all manner of conversation. And that word's behavior. Because it is written, be ye holy, for I am holy. Now, does that mean that you never mess up in any way at all? No, it means that Jesus has set to us a goal. If you have no goal, folks, then you're satisfied in whatever you're doing, wherever you're at. Jesus said, this is the goal. Be ye therefore perfect. Now, that perfect means complete and whole in him. We all understand that nothing that we can do makes us perfect or makes us holy or even makes us righteous. Our righteousness comes by Christ. Yes. Walking in the gift that he has given us. But if we just decide, okay, I can't do any better than this, I'm fine, I'm right where I'm at, then God cannot move us or grow us any further than where we're at right now. And I don't know if anybody here else has noticed, but we're not raptured yet. That's right. So if we have gone as far as we can go in Christ, what are we doing still here? Now Jesus sent us a goal. Be ye therefore perfect or complete. Walk in what he said. And Don't be satisfied with the status quo where we're at. Always continue to grow. Now, you've heard this. We're under grace. So God overlooks sin. And boy, you can get folks stirred up on this. Well, we're under grace, so it doesn't matter. And it was happening even in times, back in Paul's time. They were saying, okay, we're under grace and not under the law. See, that's true on the surface. We're under grace and we're not under law. If it hadn't been for the grace of God, we wouldn't be saved at all. It was God's unmerited favor toward us. It was not that we were so good. It was that He was so good, He just forgave us anyway. But He didn't forgive us to leave us doing the same things we were doing before He saved us. Now, in Paul, look at Romans 6. This is way back in Paul's time. Folks were saying the same thing. We're under grace, so it doesn't matter. Hey, folks, the wages of sin is still death. You ever noticed? The Bible never changed that. Go, you find it in separate. Go and sin no more. He flat forgave her. He forgave her. Go and sin no more. We leave out a lot of that, But Paul in Romans, the 6th chapter, he kind of answers this right off. What shall we say then? Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? In other words, and this is what the folks has got. Okay, we're just sinning, but it just shows how much grace God has got. No, it shows that you hadn't understood grace. You hadn't understood it. It said, God forbid, how shall we that are dead to sin live any longer therein? How can we just continue? If we're dead to sin, how can we continue to live like that? The answer to that is you can't. You can't. Well, I heard a minister say this one time. He said it doesn't, and I kind of hate to say it, but he said it. He said it doesn't make any difference how you're living. If you were saved, God will change you on your way up. No, you ain't on your way up, Hoss. Say, but salvation, if you know Jesus, it will change you. If you don't know Jesus, you'll continue on. See, there's a difference in being religiously saved and being saved by grace through Christ. Well, the Bible talks about us being born of incorruptible seed. That born again spirit will not let you rest. See, if you've got a born again spirit, again, if you've got head salvation, where you're just believing what somebody told you, that's a different story. But if you got a born again spirit, that born again spirit it'll never say you're all right in your sin. It can't. It's incorruptible. But now Titus, see, this is what we get. And folks, if we're not learning, if we don't want the lesson of grace, it's because we don't know grace. We haven't accepted grace. This is the lesson of grace. Titus, 2nd chapter, 11th verse. For the grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to all men. Do you see that? Teaching us that denying ungodliness and worldly lust, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present world, looking for that blessed hope and the glorious appearing of the great God and our Savior, Jesus Christ. Do you see that? Titus 2:11 and 12. That grace has appeared unto all men, and it teaches us to live the way that Jesus taught us to live, soberly, righteously, and godly in this present world. That's the lesson of grace. And if you're not learning the lesson of grace, that's because you hadn't understood grace. You haven't really accepted grace now. And another thing, that we always hear, and we're gonna get into this. This is kind of the crux of what I want to talk about tonight. But we got the idea that all the commandments are equal. You know, all the commandments are important. And I believe it was James that said that if you offended in one that, you was guilty of all. In other words, if you just decide, hey, I'm going to take this one out. I'm just not going to have nothing to do with this one. And then he said that you're guilty of all. But Jesus they asked him about some commandments. He gave two, what he called the greatest of the commandments. Remember that? 2 great commandments. Let's look at Matthew 22 and let's just read that. And the reason, folks, let me just say this. You know there are some of the commandments that you could do and not be saved at all. You know, there is people that is not saved that don't steal. There's people that's not saved that's not out there committing adultery. See, there's people that's not saved that can keep some of the commandments. But without salvation, it's just a thing of works and not a thing of faith. Let me turn over here to 22. Let's just read that. Matthew 22, 34. But when the Pharisees had heard that he had put the Sadducees to silence, they were gathered together. Then one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him and saying, Master, which is the great commandment in the law? So they're trying to trap him up, is what they're doing. And Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy soul and all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it. Do you see this? The second goes right along with it. That's what he's saying. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these 2 commandments hang all the law and prophets. Now what he's saying, that everything that the law said, everything that the prophets taught, all hinged on just these 2. Loving God and loving people. And if you get that first one right, the rest of them will come. I mean, you'll walk in them. You'll just walk in them. If you love God, you'll just walk in the rest, because that will become who you are. And you cannot love God without loving people. God is love. You can't love God without loving people. Everything that they teach, the prophets teach, everything that the law teached, that law taught, hung on those 2. Still does. Still does. And until we get those first 2, it's like I said, the rest of them, we might be doing some of them, but it'll just be a work of the flesh. It'll be a habit that we got into. See, there's folks that don't do a lot of the others that still lost because they left out the first 2. What that's saying, folks, is good works won't carry you. It has to start out with a love of God and with a love of people. And it was God that loved. Hey, God loves people, folks. The Bible said he so loved the world. Now, he didn't so love the shape that the world was in. If he had, he'd have just left it there. He so loved the way he had it set up when man walked in perfect fellowship with him. He so loved that he sent Jesus to put it back like that. And Jesus, in John 13 and 35, he said this, he said, By this shall men know that you are my disciples if you have love one to another. They'll know that you're his disciples if you've got that love factor working. He didn't say they'd know that we were his disciples if we came to church. He didn't say that they'd know that we was his disciples if we knew the Bible and could quote it. He said they'd know if we love people, folks. And love is not what we say. Love is action. If love doesn't prompt us into some kind of action, it's because we don't really love folks. And it didn't say love people's ways. As a matter of fact, if you love some folks' ways, you need to get back to the altar. Jesus didn't love our ways when he hung on that cross for us. But he hung on that cross where he could change who we were. But see, today, the devil tries to twist everything. And today he's twisted that real bad. He said, oh, you got to love them. You do. But if you really love them, you don't tell them they're all right in their sin. You tell them a way out of their sin. You love them to Jesus. And it's the goodness of God that brings them, folks. You tell them how much God loved them. You show them how much God loved them through you. Well, I fit to say, that's tough love. Sometimes we have to love them enough to say, okay, I'm not supporting what you're doing. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Sometimes you just have to say you don't quit loving them. It's saying you've got to show me something before I start physically aiding you anymore. See? And I'm going to tell you, that's wisdom. That's wisdom. If you don't use wisdom, the devil will line the world up at your door to make sure that you can't help people, because he'll rob you of everything that you have, that God's blessed you with. That's wisdom. Doesn't mean that you don't love folks. You do. But you just have to draw that line. Sometimes that's tough love. Well, again, that's that thing that you have to draw a line and say. Some folks you can lift up and you can help, and they'll get on their feet and they'll start doing. Other folks you lift up and he's glad he's on his feet and he ain't gonna do nothing different. See, and to keep, you can't keep throwing money at that. That's the way our government does. Throw money at it. No, let folks know I'll be here for you when you decide that what you're doing is not getting you anywhere. That it's not Bible, but there's an old saying that says God helps those that help themselves. And you cannot help a person. You can start out and try, but when you see that they're not changing what they're doing, hey, you can't outrun the harvest for them. No. Do you know, whatsoever things a man soweth, that shall he also reap? If folks is sowing the same seed, hey, you're bumping your head against the wall. You pray for them. You let them know, I'll be here. I'm here for you. When you decide to turn your life around, quit doing what you're doing. You can't be like the little boy that they said was on the street corner hitting himself in the head with a hammer. And the fellow stopped and said, son, why are you hitting yourself in the head with a hammer? He said, because it feels so good when I quit. And long as folks is hitting themselves in the head with a hammer, ain't much you can do for them. When they quit, folks, it's when you can do it, when you can help them. But God that allows us to love people also gives us wisdom to when to stop. When to stop. We were talking the other day about Jesus when he was healing people and feeding people and doing all this. He healed those that came to him with faith. He did not. He understood, and even those, he fed some, and they came to him the next day, and he said, you're not here because you saw the miracle. You're here for the bread. He said, you're not here because you want what I've got. You're here because you want me to take care of your physical needs. That's what he said. You're not here but for the miracle. You're here because of the bread. And we've had some of that right here, folks. We've had some right here at his answer ministry that would line up for your help, and then you didn't see them till they got. I had to tell a fellow one time out there. It's the last time. He had the same story every time. Same story. And he was writing, he said he was a deaf mute. He was writing stuff down on a little card. And every time he needed gas money and a little money to get him to look for a job. And somewhere he got miraculously healed after I told him we weren't going to have him no more, because I walked in Jack's one day and he was talking to one of the little girls behind the counter. You know, you want to say, hey, it's a miracle. But he sure was. But the devil will line folks up, folks. Love doesn't mean that you're stupid. Love means that you will show them that love of God, and that you will be there for them whenever they get ready. You know, and you don't just write them off. You just have to stop. You just have to stop until they understand, hey, what I'm doing is not getting me anywhere. And then you can help them. When Moses gave that commandment, and Moses gave it to start with, when over in Deuteronomy 6 chapter, when he said, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might." You know, and then he goes on down and tells them how to keep the word, and how to tell their children. The Jews call that the Shema. And they say that, a lot of the Orthodox Jews, they will quote that in it's chapter 6 of Deuteronomy 4 through 9. They'll quote those verses in their prayers, in their morning and in their evening prayers, always keeping in their mind that they need to love God, and that they need to keep his word in their mind and in their heart. And when Israel lost sight of that, say they were still going through the motions, but when they lost sight that everything must start with loving God, they lost their land. They lost their nation. When Israel fell to her enemies, they were still showing up for the feast. They were still showing up, you know, in the synagogues. They were still showing up, you know, showing up over at the tabernacle. They were still going through the motions, but they had lost sight of that. Hey, you got to start out with the love of God. If you don't know what you're doing, you're just going through you just got into a habit. When you love God, then everything that he says, his word becomes a part of you. But if you're not loving God to start with, if you hadn't got that to start with, you just got yourself into a habit. You know, you can get yourself into a habit of reading the Bible. You can get yourself into a habit of praying, and you don't know what you pray, and you don't know what you read, you just did it. But if you love God, you're reading to find out what he said. If you love people, you're praying to change somebody's life. See? It's got to start with the love of God and the love of people. Love and all its variants, you know, love, loved, loveth, all of this is in the New Testament over 200 times. So God thought that was pretty important, that we started out with loving one another and loving God. And see, there's nothing that takes the place of that, folks. Nothing takes the place of that. You know, we can have all the programs we want to have. We can have all the entertainment we want to have. If it doesn't start out with loving God, then it's all for nothing. It's all for nothing. And you know, where we're at now, we're in that entertainment mode, and there's so much going on of entertainment in churches. Well, you know, I tell you what, let's do. And look, it's all right to have things for young folks, and it's all right to have things for young married people. That ain't nothing wrong with that. But when it gets so oriented to programs that all we're doing is entertaining and not teaching folks what the Word says, and not teaching folks how to love, then we've lost sight. Or we're going to get the young folks in, we're going to do this. We're going to do that. Well, if they don't go out with the knowledge of Jesus, you've just entertained them. You might as well have took them to the show. See? If the program is not started out, well, let me teach you about God, and let me teach you about Jesus. Let me teach you about his love. And there's some good programs out there that really helps folks, but they start out with these two things. They start out with these two things. And I just throw that in there because, you know, right now we have this is a time of the year that we have a lot of well, in a little earlier, we've been past some of it where we have Bible school. Bible school. I used to love those, and it's so much of that now has turned into nothing more than programs. Not everybody, but I remember when we used to go. I guarantee you, we spent as much time looking at what the Word says as we did doing those little crafts and things that we were doing. I mean, we didn't just get out there and play ball. We had to take time, and they read to us, and they told us, Bible stories, and they let us know. Now, I still got some of those little, after all those years, some of those little certificates of graduation from Bible school. But see, it made an impression on me. I can't tell you all the stuff that we played, but I can tell you what they taught us about God. Yeah. But that was the goal, folks. That was the goal. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. By the time they get that old, if the Lord has already done something in their life, they know. They want to know. I can remember those days just being mesmerized that we had a little Baptist preacher. I was going to Ironton Baptist Church, and every Sunday night, folks, he was in the Bible, and what he did, he would take two people from every Sunday school class and put us up front, and he would give us, he'd tell us what we was going to have questions on, 2 or 3 chapters in the Bible, and then he would ask questions, and whoever was still standing at the last, if you missed one, you had to sit down. It got the ribbon award for that week. You had to put it, and everybody in our class was there waiting. Whoever was up there, they was pulling for them, and they was learning, and that they was interested in the Bible, and he sparked the interest in me that has never died. Even all those years that I was out of church, the interest in the Word never died. And hey, I was probably 8, 9 years old when we started there, but he got in that Word, and he showed me what the Lord was teaching and what the Lord was saying, and it was interesting. And I guarantee you, everybody in the class, you got to answer right. Everybody was clapping for you, but it was Bible. See, it was learning, and I thank God for it. Paul, in the first Corinthians, the 13th chapter. This is the love chapter. I want you to look at some of the things he said here. Paul, as they would say today, he was big on love. Paul said, though I speak with the tongues of men and angels and have not charity, and that's love, folks, I am become as a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. What's he saying there? And that word is the Greek agape, which means God-type love. He said, I can be speaking with tongues of men and angels, but if the foundation ain't love, I'm just making a sound. I'm making noise, but I'm not accomplishing nothing. That's pretty stout, ain't it? Although I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have faith so that I could remove mountains and have not charity, that's love, I am nothing. He said, if I'm moving mountains, folks, if I can just answer your questions, all this knowledge, if I can understand all the mysteries, but if my foundation isn't built on love, he didn't say it's pretty good. He said it's nothing. It's nothing. Faith that he could move mountains. The gift of prophecy. And that's getting big in these days. I was telling Mike the other day, and I'm not knocking anybody, folks. I'm just for Jesus. I'm just for Jesus. But I flipped on the Facebook, and some of y'all may have saw this. Had a picture of the prophet. He's out in Texas. I know some of you know right now who I'm talking about. Had a picture of the prophet out in Texas. Said, he's raising money. Don't you want to be the first to donate? And I said, thank you, no. I don't think so. look in the Bible and I see all these prophets of God, and I never see where they're holding any kind of program. Said, come on out and donate. You ever notice where the apostles and prophets talked about donating to me? No. You know why? Because Jesus had taught a principle of give, and it shall be given unto you. He had taught a principle of whatsoever thing a man sows. He had taught a principle of godly supply. That's right. And they just walked in the principle, and Jesus supplied it. And I'm not knocking folks, and I'm not knocking their method. I'm just saying there is a principle, and it's much better to walk in the principle and to love people and to love God and let God do what God does. See? We have more fundraisers. We was caught up in that a lot of time. We sold more donuts. When we first got saved, we sold candy, we sold donuts. We had every kid in the neighborhood selling. Yes, we did. Every Saturday. Till I found a principle. There's a principle. Yes. And God is a God of His Word. Yes, He is. He's a God of His Word. Just love God and love people and watch what He does. Just watch what He does. And you know, we get ideas in our head. Can I just throw this in here a few minutes? We get ideas in our head that God hadn't put in there. And we say this. I mean, we think, okay, this is great. This is for God. But, you know, I'm doing this for God. But we get this idea, oh, this is going to be good. And then we start trying to figure out how we're going to finance that. Because it's our idea, not God's. We got to finance what we've decided. You know? So a fella today that they're having some kind of little thing going on, and he said, we got to have so much money to get this done. Well, if God put that on your heart, don't you think He knows that? He will make the way. Just step out. If God done it, just step out and head in that direction and watch what He does. Watch what He does. Because He'll do it. He'll do it. Didn't He walk on the water? He sure did. He sure did. That's getting back to without faith it's impossible to please Him. Faith is not that He's going to do what I want to do. Faith is He's going to do what He promised. And I'm going to just walk along and watch and do what He tells me to do. That's what we have to learn to do. Charity suffereth long and is kind. Charity envieth not. Charity vaunteth not itself. It's not puffed up. In other words, it's not making a show out of itself. Does not behave itself unseemly. Seeketh not her own. Is not easily provoked. Thinketh no evil. Ooh, Lord, help us. Help us not to be thinking them evil stuff. You know, we said this around here several times. If you was driving down the road and you saw your brother's car parked out in front of the bar, would you think, my gosh, he's probably in there getting drunk? Or would you think he may be in there witnessing? See? There's the deal. There's the deal. Well, I ain't talking about physical, Brenda. I'm talking about brothers. Before they know the principle. Before they know the principle. Hey, I'm telling you what, you can talk drunks into stuff, but that's not God's principle. I'm going to tell you what, folks, I have walked in bars. Back when I was going around with Ryan Robinson up in Nashville, I've been in bars. Got some good witnessing going on in bars. I've heard Ryan Robinson sing gospel songs in bars.
That's it.
You know, that's when he's trying to get a country music. But I walked right in there with my T-shirt on that said, "Coming soon for the Second World Tour." Jesus. You get some conversation started. But you can love folks that's in, hey, God didn't say pick out the clean folks. You got to show love to whoever's there. That's the truth. Sometimes we do that. Sometimes we do that. Love beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. Charity never fails. But where there be prophecies, they shall fail. Where there be tongues, they shall cease. Where there be knowledge, it shall vanish. But he's talking, folks, about regardless of what else we do. What else we do, it has to start with the foundation of loving God and loving people. Love is more than words. Love is not that which we do expected to be treated in kind, but love is that which we do just because it's the right thing. Just because that's what God said. Just because God is love. You know, it's easy to act like we love folks that we know that can do something back for us. But hey, we got to love folks just because they're people that Jesus died for. That Jesus died. He died for all of us, folks. If he'd have looked at me and said, "I'm gonna see whether or not he's fit to die for," I'd have been lost, because I wasn't fit to die for. But 14:1 there of that chapter says, "Follow after love and desire spiritual gifts, but rather that you may prophesy." Follow after it. Pursue it, in other words. Follow after it. It all has to be there, folks. And we're running out of time, but if you go over and read 1 John, John has a whole lot to say about love in Little John. A whole lot. A whole lot. He's the one that declared God is. God is. Not a... John didn't say that love was an attribute of God. He said, that's who he is. That's who he is. It's not just, it's not just something thrown in there with everything else. No, he is love. And when we understand that, folks, we'll quit believing that he's doing all them bad stuff to people. When we understand that who he is love. And we need to know this, all the love that we have is what he's put in us. And none of our love amounts to his love. None of it. We've just got what he's put here. He loves greater than we can love. So knowing that, we can rest. We can have the full assurance that he's absolutely good, and that he's absolutely good all the time. All the time. All right. We appreciate you.